Ram Hare Hare. Okay. Suddenly, devotees in front began shouting, "Stop the car! Stop the car!" Ahead, the low arc of a park bridge spanned the roadway. The devotees managed to stop the 35-foot-high cart just before it reached the bridge. Although the parade appeared to have reached an unforeseen impasse, the chanting continued unabated. The previous year, the procession had taken the same route, with the smaller cart, and even then Samchandra had to climb up and saw off the spire. This year, however, Narayan had devised a collapsible dome with a crank to lower the canopy and superstructure. When Prabhupada had heard of these plans, he had asked, "Are you sure want are you sure you want to depend on mechanical means? It could be a disaster." Now the time to lower the canopy had come, and the crank wouldn't work. With the cart stopped before the bridge, the chanters gathered in great numbers, facing Prabhupada and Lord Jagannath. Under, under the bridge, at least 1,000 voices sang together, creating an incredible echo. Then Prabhupada stood, raised his arms to the crowd, and began dancing. Everyone, Bhavananda, everyone went wild. The sound was so uproarious you were deafened under that bridge. Prabhupada was dancing, jumping on the cart. Narayan. He was dancing, and as he danced, his feet crushed the flowers. His garland broke, and flowers began cascading everywhere as he danced up and down. He was leaping very deliberately, almost like slow motion. Yeah. Tamala Krishna. Prabhupada was jumping up and down, and the people went crazy seeing him in complete ecstasy. He kept jumping slowly turned around until he was face to face with Lord Jagannath. Prabhupada sat down and still the cart didn't go, and the people were roaring. "What do they want?" Prabhupada asked Tamal Krishna. "I think they want to see you dance again," Srila Prabhupada, Tamal Krishna replied. "Do you think so?" "Yes." He then got up and started dancing again. The white wool cap pushed to the back of his head, his arms extended, with the right hand still clutching the japa bead bag, his right forefinger extended and long robes flowing. So as the cart was moving, the devotees suddenly started shouting to stop the cart because they had met an obstacle because that the cart couldn't pass because it had reached the bridge. And this year, Narayan had devised a collapsible dome with the crank, and Prabhupada had heard these plans and he said, "Do you want to really depend on a mechanical means? Because it could be a disaster." And when the time came to lower the canopy, the crank wouldn't work. But while all the who guests and attendees started singing, Prabhupada started dancing and began to raise his arms and began to dance in front of the crowd. The devotees explained that everyone went wild, and the sound was so uproarious that the sound was deafening under that bridge. Then Narayan Prabhu explained that he was dancing and that his garland broke. He was leaping very deliberately. And then Tamal Krishna Prabhu explained that he was jumping up and down, and everyone was going crazy, seeing him in complete ecstasy. Then Prabhupada sat down, and the cart still didn't go. Then Prabhupada asked Tamal Krishna Prabhu, asking him, "What do the people want?" And Tamal Krishna Prabhu says, "Oh, I think they want to see you dance again, Prabhupada." And so Prabhupada again started dancing.
Hare Krishna. Yes, he then got up and started dancing again. The white wool cap pushed to the back of his head. Mm. His arms extended, right? Extended with the right hand still clutching the japa big bag. His right forefinger extended and long rows flowing. The ecstatic chanting and dancing continued. After about 15 minutes, Naranaran finally got the crank to work. And down came the canopy. Again, the cart moved forward under the bridge and on through the park. The crowd had grown now to 10,000. Wow. This was much bigger than any Krishna conscious festival ever held before. Bhavanand. Bhavanand. Many of these people who attended Rath Yatra were intoxicated. We were not intoxicated, of course, but we were higher than they. That we could understand. Everyone was smiling. Everyone was laughing. Everyone was in ecstasy. Everyone was dancing and everyone was chanting. And we were doing it more than anyone. We were doing more chanting, more laughing and smiling and feeling more freedom. We were free to have a shaved head. We were free to have a shaved head, free to wear a dhoti, free to blow a conch shell, free to spin around on the street and jump up. Even if you were a hippie, you couldn't be more far out than the Ratha cart and Jagannath, because no one looks more far out than him. The hippies had come dressed up in outfits with big feathers in their hair and everything, but they were dim compared to Jagannath. The parade route ended at an oceanside dance hall. The family dog auditorium. What is family dog auditorium? The family dog auditorium where the devotees had prepared 10,000 feast plates of prasadam, fruit salad, apple chutney, halwa, and watermelon slices. Although the cart had stopped, the chanting continued as Prabhupada led the crowd inside the auditorium to a temporary stage and altar, temporary stage and altar the devotees had erected among the bizarre trappings of the dance hall. A giant silk screen of Lord Chaitanya covered the hall's Tibetan mandala. The pictures of Lord Vishnu and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati were on the stage. The Jagannath deities now looked down um, from their high platform above Prabhupada's seat, and a garlanded statue of Lord Krishna stood on a marble pillar. So now, seeing Prabhupada's ecstatic, taking this opportunity, Prabhupada danced, and everyone again asked. They were mesmerized to see this singing and dancing. Everyone asked, let it happen again. So Prabhupada came down another 15 minutes. All sang and danced and jumped, smiling. It is a whole different experience. Or only one who is part of it, that's the Krishna consciousness, that you cannot uh, you cannot lick a honey from outside the bottle. One has to be part of it. Many times in temples also, when you have kirtan, the devotees come, sometimes people come, they like it, but they're so rigid, they don't want to participate in that. They have to be open up. They have to, when you open up, that mercy, that blissfulness, that happiness, everything comes. We cannot be rigid, over there. So the similar situation is happening here, that as Prabhupada dance and everyone seems to be singing and dancing, that when they open up, they feel this ecstasy of, and as yeah, Bhavanand Prabhu is explaining that, and the situation, everyone was very happy, and looks like now it's almost 10,000 people now all in there. And the parade ended at the Dance Hall, um, Oceanside Dance Hall, the Family Dog Auditorium, where the nice setup has been done. That's the way it is, where Lord Krishna's deity was there with garlands, pictures are there, nice setup, and Prabhupada entered the stage. Um,
My dear Lord Chaitanya, please be merciful. Drawing the audience attention to the last silk screen of Lord Chaitanya.
Okay, Kim,
Prabhupada described
Can
the
you not can you not hear her?
it's in and out,
In and out.
like high and low. Like it's not choppy, it's just the volume's going up and down.
Prabhupada began speaking and the crowd quieted. He quoted a song by Narottam Das Thakur. My dear Lord Chaitanya, please be merciful upon me. I do not find anyone as merciful as you. Drawing the audience attention to the large silk screen of Lord Chaitanya. Prabhupada described the Lord's merciful distribution of the holy name of God. Lord Chaitanya, he said, was speaking the same thing Lord Krishna has taught in Bhagavad Gita. My dear sons, do not suffer in this abominable condition of material existence. Come back to me, come back to home, enjoy eternal, blissful life, a life of knowledge. Prabhupada explained the simplicity of Krishna consciousness. Lord Chaitanya appeared 500 years ago to establish the direct principles of Bhagavad
It's
Gita.
lower now.
He taught that even
Hold on.
if you even if you do not understand the process of religion, then simply chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare. The results are practical. For example, when we were chanting Hare Krishna, all the members who were here were joining in. But now, when I'm talking about philosophy, some are leaving. You can see the Hare Krishna mantra is so enchanting that anyone in any condition can take part. And if he continues to chant, gradually he will develop his dormant love of God. It is very simple.
So then Prabhupada began speaking, and in his lecture he quoted Narottam Das Thakur's one of his songs, and it was talking about how Narottam Das Thakur was saying, My dear Lord Chaitanya, please be merciful upon me. I do not find anyone as merciful as you." And through this, he was drawing the audience's attention to the silk screen of Lord Chaitanya, and then Prabhupada described the Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's merciful distribution of the holy name of God, Krishna. And he was saying, Lord Chaitanya was explaining and teaching the same thing that Krishna had also taught in Bhagavad Gita, which is, do not suffer in this material world. Come back to me, meaning come back home, back to Godhead, the spiritual world. And Prabhupada continued explaining the simplicity of Krishna consciousness, saying that one doesn't have, even if they don't understand the process of religion or the complicated stuff, one can simply just chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And the results are practical. Prabhupada gave the example that when everyone was chanting and singing the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, everyone was assembled there and joining in. But as he speaks now, everyone starts slowly leaving because not everyone can understand and take interest in the philosophy. So he explains that if one just continues to chant, he will gradually develop the love of God. It is very simple. AJ Pro, you can read.
We're requesting everyone to chant the Hare Krishna mantra and take prasadam. When you are tired of chanting, the prasadam is ready. You can immediately take prasadam. And if you dance, then all bodily exercise is Krishnaized. And all of the attempts of the yoga processes are attained by this simple process. So chant, dance, take prasadam. Even if you do not at first hear this philosophy, it will act and you will be elevated to the highest platform of perfection. In the middle of a winter of struggle came a fortunate break for the London devotees. a meeting with George Harrison of the Beatles. For a long time, the devotees had been thinking of ways to get the Beatles to chant Hare Krishna. To the Beatles' Apple Records studio, they had once sent an apple pie with Hare Krishna lettered on it. Another time, they had sent a wind-up walking apple with the Hare Krishna mantra printed on it. They had even sent a tape of one of their kirtans and had received a standard rejection from Apple Records. So it seemed to be Krishna's special arrangement when Shamasundara suddenly met one of the most sought-after celebrities in the world, George Harrison. In a crowded room at Apple Records, Shamasundara, shaven-headed and wearing robes, sat hoping for a chance to have a few words with someone connected with the Beatles. Then George came down the stairs from a conference. As he entered the room, he saw Shamasundara, and walking over and sitting down beside Shamasundara, he asked, "Where have you been? I've been trying to meet the Hare Krishna people for the last couple of years." Shamasundara and George talked together for an hour while everyone else hovered around. "I've really been trying to meet you people," George said. "Why don't you come to my place tomorrow?" The next day, Shamasundara went to George's for lunch, where he met the other Beatles, Ringo Starr, John Lennon, and Paul McCartney. They all had questions, but George was especially interested. "George, I had a copy of the Hare Krishna album with Srila Prabhupada singing Hare Krishna with the devotees. I'd had the record at least 2 years, but I got it the week it was pressed. I was open to it. You attract those things. So I used to play that a lot of the time. I was chanting the Hare Krishna mantra long before I met Shamasundara, Gurudas, and Mukunda. I was just pleased to hear that the Hare Krishna mantra and have a copy of the record. And I knew about Prabhupada because I had read all the liner notes on that album. Having been to India, I could tell where the devotees were all coming from, with the style of dress and shaved heads. I had seen them on the streets of Los Angeles and New York. Having read so many books and looking for yogis, my concept of the devotees wasn't like other people who think the devotees have all escaped from a lunatic asylum in their pajamas. No, I was aware of the thing, and that it was a pretty heavy one, much more austerities than other groups, like no coffee, chocolate, or tea. So it's, at the beginning here, they're talking about, finishing up the speech where they're saying, hey, and like you were saying, Grung, you don't need to know all the detail, right? You don't, you might not understand the full philosophy yet, but, chant, have prasadam, chant some more, dance, if you're, all of these things are helping elevate you to the highest platform of perfection, even if you don't quite understand the philosophy yet. And then it jumps over to the London devotees who had been doing their best to find a way in with the Beatles, who at the time were the biggest thing in the world, and so they tried all sorts of different little gimmicky things, right? Sending apple pies or wind up apples and a tape of kirtan, and finally they just had, by luck one day, Shamasundara was waiting there, just sitting in the lobby, and happened to meet George Harrison, who when George Harrison saw him, he said, "What took so long? I've been waiting. I've been looking for you guys for years." And they ended up talking, and the next day he said, he had told them to come for lunch the next day, where the devotees met the other Beatles, Ringo, John, and Paul. And while they were all interested, George was especially into Krishna consciousness already. He had known about it from getting the Hare Krishna album from Prabhupada's Hare Krishna album, and he had read a lot of the books, and he had been to India, and so he understood where they were coming from, and kind of had a decent grasp on the movement already. Just it sounds like he just hadn't had the opportunity to meet these guys. And I don't know if it'll go into it, and I don't know how much people know about the Beatles, but they were heavily influenced by Vedic culture and Indian culture, big into transcendental meditation, lots of stuff like that. So they were already, by this point in their career, they were already kind of on that spiritual path, and for the devotees to step into their lives at that time was the right time, essentially, for everybody, because it was exactly what George Harrison was looking for at that time, and he was very receptive to hear it. And so yeah, I'm sure they'll talk about it more in the upcoming paragraphs.
Thank you. Second, Prabhu?
Shamsundar continued to see George regularly, and they soon became friends. George, who had been practicing a mantra given him by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, began to hear for the first time about Bhakti Yoga and the Vedic philosophy. He talked openly to Shyamasundara, Gurudasa, and Mukunda of his spiritual quest and his realizations of karma. George, a yogi I met in India, said, "You are really lucky. You have youth, fame, fortune, health, but at the same time, that is not enough for you. You want to know about something else. Most people don't even get to the point where they realize there is something beyond that wall. They are just trying to get up on top of that wall to be able to eat and have a nice house and be comfortable and all that. But I was fortunate enough to get all that in time to realize there is something else to life, whereas most people get worn out just trying to attain material things." After a visit to Haight Ashbury in 1967, George had begun to feel guilty for his role in promulgating the LSD culture. He had had the impression that the hippies of Haight Ashbury were creative craftsmen, but when he saw them drugged, dirty, and hopeless, a West Coast extension of the Bowery, he felt partly responsible. He decided to use his influential position by writing and singing songs about something more than psychedelics and sex. He was also feeling an increasing interest in Indian spirituality due, he felt, to karma from his previous lives. "George, I feel at home with Krishna. I think that is something that has been there from a previous birth. So it was like the door was opening to me at that time. But I was also like a jigsaw puzzle. And I needed all these little pieces to make a complete picture. And that is what has been happening by the devotees and Swami Bhaktivedanta coming along. Or some devotee giving me a book or my hearing that album. It's all been slowly fitting together. And these are some of the reasons why I responded to Shyamasundar and Gurudasa when they first came to London. Let's face it, if I'm going to have to stand up and be counted, then I will be with these guys rather than with those over there. It's like that. I will be with the devotees rather than with the straight people who are the so-called saints." So here we read about like Shamsundara and like they became friends, George Harrison. And George, like this was the first time he was being hearing about Bhakti Yoga. Until then, he was practicing a mantra given to him by one Maharshi, and he was open about his spiritual quest and realizations of karma. And he also tells his experience that when he met a yogi in India, where the yogi mentioned to George that he is lucky because even though he has everything, he's looking for something which is beyond that. And George explains that in that way he was fortunate that he was able to realize that there's something beyond all of this material glory and possessions. But for most people, their whole life just passes by just to attain those things. And then he also felt guilty that his music was kind of promulgating the LSD culture, and he actually he wanted to use his influential position by writing and singing songs about something more than drugs and sex. So he also felt that this was his karma, from previous life, that is showing an interest to Vedic culture. And it also says that when they basically he was impressed by what he's seen with the devotees, and it was all coming together, like somebody giving him a book, or him seeing the devotees doing Harinam in New York or the West Coast, and then it is all coming together. And he was open to partner with Shamsundar and Gurudasa and help them in spreading Krishna consciousness. So he said he would rather be counted with them than going with other people who are called saints, but really they are not saints.
Mataji there?
No, she's not yet.
Neepa Mataji?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
George was glamorous George offered help to the devotees get a building in London, and he and Shyam Sundar spoke of making a Hare Krishna record, but Shyam Sundar never pressed him. George was the glamorous superstar, the quiet, serious Beatle, the fabulous guitarist and singer who had access to all the greats, to presidents and queens wherever he went. And Shyam Sundar had a glamour of his own. He was tall, 6 feet 2, and although shaven-headed, strikingly handsome. And he was Vaishnava, fully dedicated to the Indian spirituality George was so fond of. When Prabhupada heard about George, he took seriously the possibility that George might fully take up Krishna consciousness. Carrying this to its logical conclusion, Prabhupada envisioned a world revolution in consciousness spearheaded by Krishna conscious Beatles. It is understood from your letter that Mr. George Harrison has a little sympathy for our movement, and if Krishna is actually satisfied on him, surely he will be able to join with us in pushing on the Sankirtan movement throughout the world. Somehow other, the Beatles have become the cynosure of neighboring European countries and America also. He is attracted by our Sankirtan party, and if Mr. George Harrison takes the leading part in organizing a huge Sankirtan party consisting of the Beatles and our ISKCON boys, surely we shall change the face of the world, so much politically harassed by the maneuvers of the politicians. For the London devotees, George's friendship heightened the excitement of Prabhupada's coming to London. Now that a world famous personality was waiting to meet Prabhupada, they felt perhaps they had another way to please him and to make preaching in London a success. George, by his association with Krishna consciousness and by the dint of his own spiritual evolution, began to express his devotion to Lord Krishna in his songs. Reading Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is, he could appreciate the superiority of the personal conception of the God over the impersonal. Gurudasa showed George the verse in the Gita where Krishna says that he is the basis of impersonal Brahman. George liked the concepts of Krishna consciousness, but he was wary of showing exclusive devotion to the Prabhupada and Krishna. The devotees therefore dealt with him accordingly so as not to, there's a word, I think you'll have to scroll, not to disturb him. So George was offered help to build a building in London, and he and Shyam of make spoke of making the Hare Krishna record. But George was like a glamorous superstar. He was quite serious Beatle. He was a fabulous guitarist also. And Shyam Sundar had a glamour of his own. And he was tall enough and strikingly handsome. And he was a Vaishnava, fully dedicated to Indian spirituality. George was so fond of. So when Prabhupada heard about George, he took seriously that George might take up the Krishna consciousness and carry it to its logical conclusion. Prabhupada envisioned a revolution there and spearheaded by Krishna conscious Beatles. So it is, he mentions in the letter, it is understood from the letter that Mr. George Harrison had a sympathy for the movement, and Krishna is actually satisfied on him, and he will be able to join the Sankirtan movement throughout the world. And the Beatles might become the cynosure of the neighboring European countries and America. And he's attracted by Sankirtan movement also. So it says that a huge Sankirtan party consisting of Beatles and ISKCON boys will change the face of the world. So for the London devotees, George's friendship heightened the excitement. And now that the world famous personality was meeting Prabhupada, they felt a way to please him and make preaching a success in London. George, with his association in Krishna consciousness and the spiritual evolution, began to express his devotion through his songs. And reading Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, he understood and appreciated the personality of Godhead. And Gurudasa showed George the verse in Gita where Krishna says that he's the basis of impersonal Brahman. So George liked the concepts, and the devotees therefore dealt with him accordingly, not to disturb him.
Prashanti Mataji.
On January 11th, Srila Prabhupada wrote another letter to the devotees in London, expressing more ideas of how George could best serve Krishna. I'm so glad that Mr. Harrison is composing songs like Lord, whom we so long ignored. He is very thoughtful. When we actually meet, I shall be able to give him thoughts about separation from Krishna. And then and they will be able to compose very attractive songs for public reception. The the public is in need of such songs, and if they are administered through nice agents like the Beatles, it will surely be a great success. Prabhupada cautioned the devotees not to simply depend on George for help, but to try to find a building themselves and rent it. George did want to help, however, and again he suggested the devotees make a record on the Apple label. An old favorite idea of the London devotees had been to get the Beatles to make a record chanting Hare Krishna. If the Beatles did it, the mantra would certainly become world famous. George liked the idea, but he preferred that the devotees sing it and he produce it on Apple label. You guys make the money rather than we get it, he said. Let's make a record. So the devotees went over to George's house for a chanting session. George dubbed in his guitar, and a few weeks later, the devotees returned and heard their tape. George was ready to try a session at the studio, so the devotees agreed to meet him and his musician friend Billy Preston at Trident Studios on St. Anne's LA. They recorded for a few hours. The tape sounded good. George and Syam Sundara agreed on a date for the actual recording. On the day of the recording, about a dozen devotees, including some newly recruited Britishers, assembled at the EMI recording studio on Abbey Road. When the first group of devotees arrived in George's Mercedes, a crowd of teenagers began singing Hare Krishna to the tune popularized by the rock musical Hair. While Yamuna applied Vaishnava Tilaka to the foreheads of the recording technicians, Malati began unpacking the picnic baskets of prasadam she had bought, and some of the other devotees put up pictures of Krishna and lit incense. The studio was Krishnaized. With, with Paul McCartney with Paul McCartney and his wife, Linda, operating the control console, the recording session began. Everyone worked quickly, making side one of the 45 RPM record in about an hour. George played organ and Mukunda played mridanga. Yamuna sang the lead with Shyam Sundara backing her, and other voices blended in the chorus. And to make it come out exactly right, everyone concentrated on Prabhupada and prayed for spiritual strength. Prabhupada wrote a letter to the devotees explaining how George can serve Krishna. He also gave ideas of how he can compose songs. He was glad that he composed a song called Lord Whom We So Long Ignored. And he remarked that he was very thoughtful, and he said he will give him thoughts about the separation from Krishna, so that that will attract public, and he can compose such songs, and it will be a great success. And Prabhupada also cautioned devotees not to entirely depend on George, but to find a building and rent it. And if George wants, he can help. Um, and and suggested to make a record with the Apple label. And devotees are very keen on getting a record done by Beatles about about the Hare Krishna chanting. But George liked the idea, but he preferred devotees to sing it rather than he singing. So finally they decided to make a record. The devotees also went over to George's home for chanting session, and they recorded for a few hours, and they finally fixed a date for the actual recording. On the day of the recording, they all of them assembled at EMI Studios, and then Yamuna applied Vaishnava Tilaka to everybody. Malati unpacked the prasadam, and they also lit incense and made the studio Krishnized. And then they started the session. George played organ, Mukunda mridanga, and Yamuna was leading the kirtana, while Shyam Sundara was backing her. And they made a record, one side of the record in an hour, and they were all praying to Prabhupada for spiritual strength and concentrated on Prabhupada. That's all.
Shikar Prabhu?
On the fourth take, everything went smoothly, with Malati spontaneously hitting a brass gong at the end. Then they recorded the flip side of the record, praise to Srila Prabhupada, Lord Chaitanya and his associate, and the six Goswamis. Afterward, George dubbed in the brass guitar and other voices. The devotees, engineers, everyone felt good about it. This was going to be big, George promised. As the record went into production, the devotees returned to their regular work, still living separately. Prabhupada set the time of his arrival for early September. He would go to Hamburg and then come to London. He said even if there was no temple. Miraculously, only 2 months before Prabhupada's arrival, things began to come together. Gurudas met a real estate agent with a building on Burke Place near the British Museum. The devotees could move in immediately. An ideal location, £41 a week, and immediate occupancy. It was wonderful. Mukunda wrote Prabhupada asking him for money for the down payment. Prabhupada agreed. Shamsundara got a letter from George on Apple Corporation Limited. Apple Corporation Limited stationery stating that Apple would guarantee payments if the devotees faulted. Within a week, the devotees had a 5-story building in central London. But when the devotees went to live at their new center on Bury Place, city officials said they did not have the proper housing permits. The red tape could take weeks, even months. Again, the devotees were without a place to live and worship together. Shyamsundara, however, on faith that everything would work out, began constructing a temple room of California redwood in the building. John Lennon then suggested to Shyamsundara that the devotees come and live with him at Tittenhurst, a large estate he had recently purchased near Ascot. He needed some renovation done, and if the devotees would help, he would give them a place to live. Can our Guru also stay there? Shyamsundara asked. John agreed, and the devotees moved into the former servants' quarters at John's estate. Only a few weeks before Prabhupada's arrival, the record Hare Krishna Mantra was released. Apple Records staged a promotion and brought press reporters and photographers in a multicolored bus to a blue and white pavilion where the devotees had gathered with George. So here we see the recording on the fourth take. Everything went very smoothly. And then Malati Mataji, she spontaneously, she was hitting the brass gong in the end. And then after the Hare Krishna recording, the recording flipped towards the prayer section where there was prayers offered to Srila Prabhupada, Lord Chaitanya and his associate in the six Goswamis. And then after that, George Harrison, he dubbed in his brass guitar the entire recording, and the devotees, the engineers present there, everybody felt very good. And then George promised that this recording is going to be very big. And then after the recording was done, the devotees returned to their regular work, and then they're still living separately. And then Prabhupada, he informed devotees that he would be visiting London on early September, but he said he would first visit Hamburg and then come to London. And then he said even if there was no temple in London, he would still visit London. And then just before Prabhupada's arrival, about 2 months before Srila Prabhupada's arrival, things began to come together. So Gurudas Prabhu, he met a real estate agent, and then there was a building on Bury Place near the British Museum. And then that real estate agent offered the devotees could move in immediately. And then the rent was only 41 pounds a week, and then it was ready for immediate occupancy. So it was very, it was very amazing. And then Mukund Maharaj, he wrote to Srila Prabhupada asking for the money for the down payment for that building. And then Prabhupada immediately agreed. And then Shamsundar Prabhu, he got a letter from George, and then just a guarantee letter that if the devotees faulted, then the Apple Corporation would pay the rent. And then within a week, everything, all the formalities was done, and then devotees had the 5-story building in central London. But and then when devotees went there to live in the new center on the Bury Place, the city officials still did not have the proper housing permit. So there was a red tape, and then to get the housing permits, it could take few weeks or months. But unfortunately, again, the devotees were there without any place to live or worship together. But Shamsundar Prabhu, he still had faith, and then he thought everything will work out. And then with that in mind, he started constructing a temple room made of from California redwood in the building. So in the meantime, John Lennon suggested until that building is ready, he suggested that the devotees could come and live with him on his estate at Tinterhurst. Tinterhurst, that's a large estate that John Lennon recently purchased. And then, but he mentioned that he needed some renovation to be done. And then if the devotees would be, and if the devotees would help him with that renovation, then he would give them a place to live. And then Shamsundar Prabhu asked if can Srila Prabhupada, their guru, also stay there. And then John agreed. And then all the devotees moved into John Lennon's former servants' quarters on his estate. So just before Srila Prabhupada arrived, the Hare Krishna mantra, the record was released, and then all the Apple Corporation, they staged a big promotion and then brought many press reporters and photographers to the pavilion where devotees had gathered with George Harrison. It's only me, Prabhu, today.
Okay. Vijayanand Prabhu?
The first day, the record sold 70,000 copies. Within a few weeks, the devotees appeared on the popular TV show Top of the Pops, singing their song. John Lennon's estate, formerly owned by the Cadbury family, consisted of 76 acres of lawn and forest with a large manor and many smaller buildings. John and his wife Yoko lived in the manor. The servants' quarters where Prabhupada and the devotees were to live were 4 separate apartments in a single narrow building near the manor. About 15 devotees moved in, reserving one apartment for Prabhupada and his servant. John wanted the devotees to tear out the hardwood walls and floors in the main house and replace them with the new walls and black and white marble tile floors. While this renovation was beginning, Isana, who had recently arrived from Canada, began with a few helpers to convert the old music recital hall into a temple, complete with Vyasasana for Srila Prabhupada. The devotees worked day and night on Prabhupada's quarters, the temple room, and Prabhupada's Vyasasana. With such energy did they work with that John and Yoko could see that the devotees were obviously in love with their spiritual master. When the devotees were making a tape to send to Prabhupada in Germany, Isana asked John if he had anything he wanted to say to their guru. John smiled and said he would like to know Prabhupada's secret that made his followers so devoted. The stage was set. The time had come for the principal character to enter. Lord Krishna's pure devotee was at last coming to England. For the 6 devotees who had pioneered Krishna consciousness in London, it had been a long struggle. But now it seemed all their once impossible dreams were coming true. They had found a place for Prabhupada to live in, and they had obtained a temple in the center of London. This was Krishna's blessing. So this best just starts with like how how the feedback or how the people reacted for the album that got released. And the record on the first day itself, it sold like 70,000 copies, and it made them very popular. And they also featured in a popular TV show, Top of the Pops, singing their song. And also regarding the place for staying, it was John Lennon's estate, which was like around 76 acres of lawn and forest, and he was living with his wife, and also there was like servants quarters, and it was the place where Prabhupada and his devotees need to live, and it was like 4 separate apartments near the manor. And more than 15 devotees moved in. They reserved one apartment for Prabhupada and his servant. And John was looking at the devotees for changing the hardwood walls and floors in the main house and replace it with the marble tile floors. Also, when the renovation was in progress, Isana, who had came from Canada, with a few helpers, converted the old music recital hall into a temple along with Prabhupada's Vyasasana. And the devotees were working day and night, and also and they made a lot of efforts in changing the interiors as well. So even John and Yoko witnessed like how devotees were very much in love with spiritual master. And when they were planning to send a tape to Prabhupada in Germany, Isan asked the landlord if they have anything to say to his guru, and he mentioned that he would like to know the secret, like how he made the followers which were more devoted. And as these things were going on, the stage was set, and Prabhupada, who was the inspiration for all these people, had decided to enter into the England. And those 6 devotees who came to London initially had a long struggle, but now things which seems to be impossible become possible, and they found that a place where Prabhupada can live. Also, they were happy that they built a temple in the center of London. So they felt like everything was because of Krishna's blessing.
Some of the readings today, I think, with this, and any reflections from this anyone to share? It is a good subject. Before we proceed to the next chapter, any reflections anyone wants to share? We begin. Prabhupada came to San Francisco, right? And he's planning to expand so much of plans. At the same time, as devotees got ready to go to London, they met Prabhupada at what is it? Montreal. They met at Montreal, and Prabhupada gave a little training. They left for the Montreal, and Prabhupada is now always in touch with them. The New Vrindavan project started, and he visited New Vrindavan. Now this is the LA Rath Yatra we did, right? LA Rath Yatra, and devotees now see some success in London, right? Now the temple is ready. Okay. Yes. Anyone wants to say some more on this? One thing I wanted to again that a very deep faith on Prabhupada. They could do whatever Prabhupada said, not only now, at that time, now also. Prabhupada follows a very unflinching faith, which is very unusual. And because they have seen personally, they have associated, they developed that kind of faith until now. That's why when you meet Prabhupada's disciple, anybody disciples, whoever is left now, you will hear how convincing they are, how whatever Prabhupada says, that's what it is. Ultimate answer. So that we learned for many things we learned with, and Prabhupada is still there. And we hope one day we will have that faith in Prabhupada's teachings. And yes, anyone else, anything want to share?
Is Bhaktivedanta Manor, is that a gift of George Harrison? I don't recall.
Yes,
It is, right?
George Harrison gave. Yeah. Did we cover that?
No.
No, it'll come late. I think
Oh,
next
is it later?
chapter.
Yeah.
Next chapter will
Spoilers.
come.
Spoiler alert.
George Harrison did a great help there with
And
Krishna
then
book. And
he also did yeah, that song he has was Our Sweet Lord is massive.
many things. Yeah, he did many. He wanted to take initiation from Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, I don't think you need to take initiation. You do
I mean
whatever.
that song, I think everybody I assume you know that song where it's a song he wrote that.
Oh my sweet Lord.
Yeah, and I mean that's a massive tune that everybody knows, and it starts chanting the Hare Krishna mantra halfway through it.
Yes. Still it is famous, that song?
Oh, massive, huge.
Oh, is it?
Oh yeah,
That's nice.
every my dad sings that one. Everybody's dad sings that one.
Oh, does he sing Hare Krishna also in between, your dad?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's because it flows right into the song, so everybody.
Wonderful. If your dad sings Hare Krishna, and how fortunate they are, because don't I hope we read the Lila, no, we read the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Just as Haridas Thakur is mentioning, just even chanting the two syllables in one word, two syllables, it has its own point, spiritual point. If your dad is singing, and how fortunate he is actually, and that's very amazing.
I just
So everybody, I think we should promote this song more often.
it's a good song.
Yeah, because already there it's established and it's old one. I don't know if people are very much still familiar with it. Let's you and Scott, we try from our side. Let them get acquainted more and more. Even once chanting Hare Krishna, that itself is bringing. They're definitely going to take a human life, human birth. That's for sure, 100%. So George Harrison's contribution is great. He was not an ordinary person. I'm glad, let's I don't know where the audio we have. If you have, just share it. Yeah, I don't know what public listen, how, let's share it, where we can promote more and more actually. Thank you. Anyone else? Any reflections from your readings? The ecstatic chanting and dancing of Rath Yatra, successful Rath Yatra, 10,000 people. And what else you all read just now?
So they recorded the Hare Krishna record.
Oh, with George Harrison?
Yeah.
Okay, you're saying cycle.
Yeah, I had to step away. We also read about New Vrindavan, like the beginnings of New Vrindavan,
Yes.
where Prabhupada wanted to have very simple living and high thinking. And he spent some time with Hayagriva and Kirtanand Swami.
Right.
And it was very austere. They had to go through a lot of austerities because it was not at all, it was completely rural and completely away. So everything had to be done by themselves, even building the houses and everything.
Well, the way you're presenting is, for us, it is austere, but for them, it is very pleasurable, right?
Yeah.
So how we present the suffering, but devotees are not suffering.
Yes. The voice is in and out, Prabhu.
My voice is not clear.
Yeah, it's in and out. Now it is clear.
So if you no, so if you talk about those villagers and they will see.
Lost you again, Krishna.
How come it goes?
It's not lagging. It's the volumes going up and down. So you'll sound like we can faintly hear you.
Maybe it's internet. Internet is the issue probably.
Microphone. There. Now you
Okay.
sound.
So we have accepted by the name of advancement, we have accepted the difficult life as a simple life and simple life as a difficult life. So basically they were not living, yes, anything you need to do at the beginning, a lot of some austerity is needed, but that's the real most pleasurable and pleasant life. Otherwise, why Krishna would ask us to go through these sufferings? But I'm just saying how we present that. Thank you for reminding. It was not an austere life. No, it is a really that's the way life. Prabhupada said, this is the way life has to be. Simple, clean, eat, healthy living. But yeah, because maybe you're saying because it was not developed yet, there's austerity was there. In Radhanath Swami Maharaj, my spiritual master explains that while they were working on developing that, they had no running water, and sometimes they used to break the ice and get the water down from the lake, and that water they used to bath. That is called austerity. Yes, I agree with that. But we haven't gone up to that far, huh?
Yep.
Yeah, that's in New Vrindavan. Yeah. But in general, whatever Prabhupada and Krishna consciousness says, that is really not an austere life. It is a smart life. Simple living and high thinking is smart life. Yeah. Accepting, from the nature, getting from the nature, milk, food products, and worshiping Krishna. Anyway, just wanted to see if we can, because sometimes when we may present that we are better situated than them, then we will never be attracted towards that. So whole purpose of Krishna consciousness is that we realize, we understand that that simple so-called austere life appears like austere, that is the better life. Then we will be attracted towards it. Otherwise, no one wants to take a difficult life. That's the fact, including me. So anyway, just wanted to share. Thank you. Anything else, Cyclone Prabhu?
That's it.
Anyone else? So we'll move to next chapter then. It's already there. Yeah, you already changed. Yeah. So we are beginning at chapter 30, London, a dream fulfilled.
Rajesh, Rajesh, are you there?
Yes, Prabhuji. Chapter 30, London, a dream fulfilled. London, September 11, 1969. With the cooperation of Apple Records and Lufthansa German Airlines, the devotees arranged a reception for providers of the airplane. He was escorted to a car and driven to a VIP lounge. Bypassing the formalities of down on them, smiling. The devotees rose, brushing the devotees rose, brushing wet macadamia from their dhotis and saris, and joyfully surrounded Prabhupada as he entered the lounge. Inside the terminal, Prabhupada confronted a mass of reporters and cameramen and several dozen friends of the devotees. A clean cloth covered one of the lounge sofas and vases with yellow gladioluses sat on either side. Prabhupada walked over to the sofa and sat down, and Shyam Sundar garlanded him with red and white carnations. Prabhupada began leading Kirtan. The devotees were oblivious to all, but Prabhupada and the reporters resigned themselves to simply standing and observing while the devotees sang and danced ecstatically. The eager devotees were unabashed during the kirtan, and their shouts of Hari Bol and Jai Prabhupada, as well as blast from a conch shell, punctuated the regular chanting of Hare Krishna. After the kirtan, the reporters remained at a distance as Prabhupada spoke affectionately to almost each devotee seated before him. Where is Janaki? He asked. Oh, yes. How are you? Bhibhavati. How is your daughter? Actually, you are all my fathers and mothers. You're taking such care. For the devotees only, they and Prabhupada were present in the lodge, and they strained to catch everything he did or said. They couldn't have cared less about any outsider's reaction. Finally, Mukunda invited the reporters to come forward. If any of you gentlemen have any questions, you can ask them of Prabhupada. Jai. So Prabhupada here is in London, and his arrival on the airport is explained here. And devotees coming in saris and dhotis with Vaishnav Tilak. They're coming in the airport, paying obeisances to Srila Prabhupada. There's a proper cameraman, reporters, rush is there, and there's sitting arrangement for Prabhupada done. And there's bigger Prabhupada and the reporters, they are just standing there and they are figuring out what's happening, and everyone, all the devotees are in ecstasy, chanting Hari Bol, Jai Prabhupada, and conch shell is blown and the Hare Krishna Mahamantra is chanting, going on. And once the kirtan gets over, the reporter remained at a distance at Prabhupada, spoke to affectionately to almost each and every devotee. Prabhupada was very personal. He talked about Janki and he talked to Vibhavati, like that. So for the devotees, only they and Prabhupada were present in the lodge. They were not worried about anything else, what's going around. And they strained to catch everything he did or said. They couldn't have cared less about any outsider's reactions. And finally, Mukunda invited the reporters to come forward. And then the reporter came. And Prabhupada said, if any of you have any questions, Mukunda Maharaj said, if you have any questions, please ask to Prabhupada. So this is how Prabhupada's dealings with his devotees were there. Amazing. Jai.
Thank
Shri
you,
Prabhupada.
Prabhu. Yeah. The reporters moving in. What do you think of this reception? Prabhupada. I am not very much fond of reception. I want to know how people give reception to this movement. That is my concern. Devotees in unison. Hari Bol. Reporter. Is this a very special welcome for you, or is this a performance you go through each day? Prabhupada. No. Wherever I go, I have got my disciples. In Western countries, I have now about 20 centers, especially in America. So the American boys are very enthusiastic. I think in Los Angeles and San Francisco, I got a very great reception. In the Rath Yatra festival, about 10,000 boys and girls followed me for 7 miles. Devotees, Hari Bol. Sun reporter. What do you try to teach, sir? Prabhupada. I am trying to teach what you have forgotten. Devotees laughing. Hari Bol, Hare Krishna. Sun reporter. Which is what? Prabhupada. That is God. Some of you are saying there is no God. Some of you are saying God is dead. And some of you are saying God is impersonal or void. These are all nonsense. I want to teach all the nonsense people that there is God. That is my mission. Any nonsense can come to me. I shall prove that there is God. That is my Krishna consciousness movement. It is a challenge to the atheistic people. This is God. As we are sitting here face to face, you can see God face to face. If you are sincere and if you are serious, that is possible. Unfortunately, you are trying to forget God. Therefore, you are embracing so many miseries of life. So I am simply preaching that you become Krishna consciousness and be happy. Don't be swayed by these nonsense waves of Maya or illusion. So the reporters so after Mukunda led in, the one reporter came in and asked, what do you think of this reception? And Prabhupada says that he's not very much fond of reception. He cares more about how the people look at his movement and the reception they give for his movement, which is Krishna consciousness. And all the devotees are near to Haribol as in agreement. And then the reporter said, asking, is this very special welcome? Or is this something you happens often, like every day? Prabhupada says this is actually normal because wherever he goes, he has centers. And now Prabhupada has about 20 centers in the Western countries, especially in America. And all of his disciples are very enthusiastic. And whenever he goes, lands somewhere, he is received by a very great reception. They explain how in Los Angeles and San Francisco, he had a great reception, including the fact that in the Rath Yatra festival, 10,000 boys and girls followed him for 7 miles. And then the reporter asked him, what does Prabhupada teach? And Prabhupada says is what they have forgotten. And the reporter asked, which is what? And Prabhupada says that they have all forgotten God, because some said there is no God, some said God is dead, and some say God is impersonal or void. And Prabhupada said this is all nonsense, and he wants to teach the people that there is God. And he says that all the nonsense can come through him, and he will prove that God is there. Just as how the reporter and Prabhupada are sitting right in front of each other, Prabhupada says if one is sincere and serious, then one can see God face to face. But unfortunately, in this world, everyone is covered by illusion, by Maya, and they're all trying to forget God. And they're embracing the miseries of life, thinking it's the happiness of life. And he is, and so Prabhupada is preaching about Krishna consciousness. And if one becomes Krishna consciousness, they will always be happy. And to not be swayed by these waves of Maya or illusion. Or actually, it's 8:43. I think we can end it here. Is that fine?
It's up to you.
You want to just?
Hare Krishna. I'm sorry, I have another call was going on. I had my class going on today, so that's why I couldn't be very much part of it. We will have some more reflections tomorrow from all of you, so I can get updates for myself. So we'll finish it here today. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Shri Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna.
Lilamrt ki jai. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Doesn't work.